Hello, welcome to Interview with Miss Panda. I'm your host, Amanda Schoenblaget. My guest today is Adam Beck, who is the founder of Bilingual Zoo and Bilingual Monkeys. And he is also the author of the new book, as you can see, Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability. This is a fun book, and I really enjoyed it. And I am thrilled to have Adam join me today. And today, Adam actually is in Hiroshima, Japan. He lives in Japan with his wife, who is Japanese, and his two children who are attending the local Japanese school. Adam is going to share with us his first book and also his bilingual education journey as a writer, a coach, a father, and a teacher with us. And so I am very thrilled to have him to be here with us and share all the information with us here on the bilingual parenting journey. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. And hello to Amanda from Hiroshima, Japan. Hello to everyone else out there in the world. I'm thrilled to be here. I love talking about this subject. And I am in Hiroshima, Japan. And I've been here for the past 20 years. And my wife, as Amanda said, is Japanese. And we have two children. My daughter is 12 now, and my son is 9. And they do attend the local Japanese schools. Because my wife's English level is a bit low, we have always used the one person or one parent, one language approach from the very start. And we're pretty strict about that. For our circumstances, that's really the best approach. So I use English exclusively with my kids, and she uses Japanese exclusively with them as well.
Right. And how about when you are talking to each other as a family?
Well, that's interesting because when I'm speaking with my wife, we actually maintain the same approach. So, well, her English level, her speaking ability is lower than her comprehension. So she can understand quite a bit more than she can say. So I can continue using English when we communicate. And I do have some ability in Japanese, so she can use Japanese with me. And so for the benefit of the kids, really, particularly their English side, it was important for me to, from the very start, use English and maintain English. So my children would grow up with a real need to use English as well. So when we speak as a family, for example, at the table, I'm speaking English to my children and to my wife, and she's speaking Japanese to them and to me, and the children are bouncing back and forth from English when they communicate with me and Japanese when they're speaking to their mother. So it's a bit strange, I suppose, for someone kind of looking in from the outside, but it essentially works for us, and it certainly has worked for as an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to their bilingual upbringing.
Absolutely. I think actually we also do the one parent, one language method here in our household, in our family. And I think that's actually worked very well for a very long time, but we'll talk about, when the kids go to school, that'll be a little different story. But still, I think what really I think is very interesting is because my kids are speaking Mandarin Chinese to me, for example, at the dinner table, and actually my husband has been very supportive about this. He actually starts to use some of the limited Chinese or ask the children what they are talking about to me, and so the kids will do the interpretation for him from time to time. And I think that also helps a lot to make the kids feel like the language actually they are learning with me is very important. So I think that's probably reflect some of the family situation.
I think so. I think that raises the important point about making the language meaningful. It really needs to be meaningful. Otherwise, the child really won't feel that genuine need, that organic need to use the language actively.
Right. So I think, how about your own personal language journey, your own personal language experience? I know you speak some Japanese, and how about other languages, when you were growing up?
Well, I grew up in the Midwest in the United States in a small town just by the Mississippi River, Quincy, Illinois. I really had no need or even much interest at the time in foreign languages. I did study some French early on, and I was able to count to 10 and some things like that, but I never found it meaningful, really, because my father had spent some time in France and developed some proficiency in French, but there was no real need for me to use French at the time. And so I really had no successful language learning experiences until I was older. I was already an adult, and I was in the Czech Republic for a few years. And I studied pretty hard, and it's a difficult language in some ways, but I made some progress, and I felt pretty good about that progress. And I felt like I had a breakthrough in terms of learning language. So from there, it wasn't too much longer after that I came to Japan. And so I studied very hard once I arrived, and made good progress over time. And so I think that progress has kind of taken a hit since my children were born, because I really then put more attention on nurturing their English, and so less attention on my own Japanese at that point.
Right.
But that's my own personal journey. But beyond that, I think what's, I guess, most relevant at this point to our conversation about raising bilingual children is that when I came to Japan, I started teaching at Hiroshima International School, and this was 20 years ago. And that's when I started gaining, I think, best practices in terms of working with bilingual and multilingual children. And over time, I've worked with hundreds of bilingual and multilingual kids. And then my own two kids came along. As I say, my daughter is 12 and my son is 9. So the combination of working with many other children, my students, and my own children over the past 20 years has led me to gaining this kind of experience in this particular area, working with bilingual children and now bilingual families. And so my blog, I started the blog for more than 4 years ago, Bilingual Monkeys, and the spin-off of that became a forum for more interaction between my audience, and that's the Bilingual Zoo, and both can be freely accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. And then it led to my book, which is really the culmination of the past 20 years. So the book has been in the making for the past 20 years and tries to bring together my experience so that it can be of help to other families who are now on this journey as well. So I view it as a big buffet of food for thought, and I don't try to be prescriptive about the ideas, but I really, really want to offer as much support through ideas and inspiration as I can to families so they can experience more success and more joy on their own bilingual journey.
Absolutely. And then I think the book basically has a collection of 30 perspectives and also the 30 principles. And would you like to touch on that? Why do parents need the principles and the perspectives at the same time?
Well, yes, the content of the book is arranged that way into these 30 perspectives and 30 principles. And what that means is that, to me, the greatest success I think we can experience is when we first view the bilingual journey in a certain light. And in this case, there are 30 different lights, 30 different perspectives. And I think those perspectives are ways of thinking about this, because if we can think about it in an appropriate way, in a wider and more effective way, then I think our actions will follow, and I think the efforts we make will be more effective. And so that's why I've divided it into these two areas, where the perspectives are ways of thinking, the principles are ways of acting or ways of doing, those principles become the principles, the practical ideas and habits and routines that can lead to greater success. So it's the combination. These two areas overlap, of course, but I think it's the combination of the two that really can help empower a family's bilingual journey through a wide variety of ideas that any family really can pick and choose from to support their own particular circumstances and their own particular aims.
Right. So we're going to touch on, for the, well, where do parents start? I think, you see the baby here, on the cover of your book, so we would like to start as early as possible. And why are the early years so important? And how about the parents? They kind of missed this stage, of their kids, and they're a little bit older. So what do they do?
Well, I think for the most part, the perspectives and principles apply to families who are just beginning the journey with a baby, or even children that are a bit older. So I don't think it's too late to join the party, let's say, and benefit from the same kinds of ideas. Because, if there's one thing I could say and leave people with today, it would be that this basic idea, and it's kind of the heart of the book. And I think everything else, not only within the book, but at my blog and in the forum, it revolves around this basic idea. And this basic idea is one that there are two core conditions for success in terms of promoting language development, the target language or languages that are a part of each family. So what is that? Well, first of all, and the most important one really, is exposure, input. The child needs to have ample exposure to that target language. And there's no getting around that, really. And I think because if we do start as early as possible, then we have an opportunity to build up that target language at the same time, perhaps, as the majority language is growing as well. So it really does help, I think, if the family starts early, and when the baby is born, the target language, the minority language, can be emphasized, and an ample amount of exposure can be provided, because if there's a head start to the minority language, that really can help over time moving forward. And so I really encourage parents to start as early as possible. And so the idea of exposure on one hand and need on the other hand, and there may be exceptions to that idea of need, the second core condition, but in general, of course, children need to feel this genuine need, this organic need to actively use the language. It has to feel meaningful to them. And so again, if the parents are able to start early on, and the child is, let's say, conditioned through an ample amount of exposure during those first few formative years, then what can happen, the early aim, this primary aim early on, is to condition the child to use that target language, particularly with the minority language parent or parents, of course, when that child begins to speak. So that's really the core of the whole thing, these two core conditions of exposure and need. And if parents can remember that and always kind of come back to that, because those are the two things that will bring success on your journey over time.
I think this is very important, the need for the language, the exposure, the need when the kids are younger. And I remember when my children were little, because my son is 13 years old now, my daughter is 11. And I think even now, I think the exposure and need are still very important to them. Because if you create a need, they just feel like, I have to speak this language. So people say, why are you always taking them to some kind of weird Chinese grocery store? I think because there is a grandma who can speak Chinese, and she can only speak Chinese. So, and then she's
Absolutely.
very nice. So, and she always gives them candy. So they want to go back and talk to her.
Candy. Yes, candy. Well, that's the third core condition, I think, is candy. Exposure, need, and candy. Yes. No, but you're absolutely right, Amanda. You're absolutely right. And, exposure and need and candy, I think it runs throughout childhood. It runs the full length of childhood and needs to be the spine of our efforts. And I think if we can be mindful and proactive about those efforts and tend to and give attention to exposure and need as much as we can, as creatively and resourcefully and playfully as possible, then I do think that over time, over the months and years of childhood, we will experience a lot of satisfying progress and a lot of really rewarding success.
Absolutely. I know you also have done a lot of things with your kids. We're still doing all that, but you make things very fun. And then I think you've been, I have read a lot of your articles about, the fun outings and things like that. I do the same thing. And I think that's the idea, to maintain the fun, to make the kids feel like they want to use the language, because the language links with something awesome, something joyful, something like the parents have been very carefully planned and for them, so they can keep using the language. So I think absolutely, when they're young, we keep doing that, and then when they're a little bit older, and that comes a challenge when they go to school. And would you talk about the years when the kids go to school?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Let me just comment one more thing, or underline what you're saying, because I think it's very, very important to stress that we need to be, and it feels, or it maybe sounds that, that it's an odd balance, and sometimes it can be, but I think we have to be very serious about this on one hand, but very playful on the other hand. And yes, fun needs to be a very big part of it. And if we're not experiencing fun in our efforts, certainly the children won't be experiencing fun either. And if it's not fun, at least on balance for the most part, then, something's wrong. This should be a joyful experience, again, for the most part. It can be frustrating too, I understand that. But it really should be playful and fun, because also that's what leads to greater success, because that's what engages the child in that experience. If what I was offering the children in terms of their experience of English, because that's my target language in Japan, if what I was offering them wasn't generally fun and playful, I really don't think they would really kind of warm up or even gravitate towards it. So, we want to engage our children in the language. How do we do that? By being playful, by being, creative and fun in our approaches, I think, and that makes it enjoyable for everyone. And here's just a quick example before I talk about schooling, but, just yesterday we took a hike in the, up the mountain. We have a small mountain behind our house, basically. And we went through the forest. And the reason we did that is because we were searching for Bigfoot. It was on TV the night before. There was a show about Bigfoot. We were watching that in English, and the kids were kind of getting excited about it. And so I thought, okay, let's go on a hunt for Bigfoot. And we had a lot of fun with that idea. And we were looking for clues, and, we just took it in a really fun way. And we were even talking about making another movie, a short film about, Bigfoot ideas in the forest. We had already made a movie in the spring called Purple Monster in the Woods, which was another, wasn't exactly Bigfoot, it was a monster thing. So anyway, my point again is that, how can you have fun with your kids? Not only for language learning, because it's good for that, it certainly is good for that, but it's the fulfillment of your bond and your relationship and your fleeting time with your kids. We're not going to be with our kids that long, frankly, and we have to use that fleeting time well. And so, be serious, but be playful. And I think that same principle runs through schooling. When the child gets into school, suddenly we're faced with this sort of situation where, in many cases, there's this sudden immersion in the majority language, this spike in majority language exposure. And sometimes that can be hard to contend with, because it's a very different sort of scenario suddenly, because prior to that, before the child enters the school, they may be more or less immersed in a minority language environment at home, particularly if the minority language parent is the main caregiver, right? And so in any event, I think what happens very often is that there is this spike in majority language exposure. And at that point, it can be kind of a shock for the parents, especially if the child is suddenly kind of losing their second language. And what I mean is that they're not really losing it, but they're losing their active use of the language.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
everybody is using the majority language at school.
Yeah, they start using the majority language more and leaning on that more. So at that point, we have to, continue to be as proactive, mindful and proactive as we can about our efforts day by day to provide, again, that exposure on a daily basis and a need to continue actively using the language too.
Right. I also think like this is usually the time when the kids start school. A lot of parents start to think it's too hard, and they kind of, I don't think they fall off the bilingual wagon, but I think just because they don't know how to deal with the situation, and they kind of like, okay, that's it, that's the end of our journey. But I really don't feel that's the case. I do understand there's a tsunami of the majority language coming at you because it is so strong. I remember when my son went to school, I was like, what happened? Just in 2 weeks, I think he just totally switched. I was like, whoa, this is really, really something very more than, what I have expected. And I think that's most of the time, that's where, when the parents think, okay, that's it. I don't think I can do this anymore. And so do you feel that's also probably the turning point, and also the part the parents need to be very strong to keep it going?
Well, yeah, I think the idea is, again, getting back to the idea of starting early, is that, we can kind of use this idea, and I talk about it in the book, but if we can kind of foresee certain challenges even before they arise, we can, in a way, prevent them, or we can lessen their impact, because I call this preventive medicine, right? Because if you can think ahead and you can give a head start to the minority language, that really can help a lot once this transition takes place and the child begins schooling. Because yes, at that point, I think it's almost inevitable. It kind of depends on the family's particular circumstances. But, the majority language will become, stronger and more dominant. But yet at the same time, if there is this kind of head start or emphasis early on to the minority language, I think that can really help sustain progress beyond that transition. So I really would encourage parents, again, to start early and to think that way in terms of, okay, preventive medicine, how can I kind of prevent or lessen the impact of that schooling transition? And so that's one way, certainly, to handle this, and that was in my head from early on. And at the same time, there's no getting around the fact that I do think we need to continue, perhaps in new and resourceful ways, but we need to continue being mindful and proactive about our efforts after the children enter school, because it's certainly possible to sustain that progress, but we have to continue, even if we feel, frustrated about, this kind of new reality. If we feel frustrated and kind of tired out by it, but, take a break, come back to, some inspiration, come to my blog or my forum, read, the ideas in my book, and search elsewhere online and talk to parents in general. But, I do think it's certainly fine, and all of us feel this way from time to time, at least, where, we're tired, this is hard to sustain day after day, but it's possible, we can take a break when we need it, and we can we can complain and we can cry, but we can stand back up finally, and we can get back up, and we can move forward again. And there's a Japanese proverb which is, fall down 7 times, get back up 8. So we just have to get back up finally and keep going. And finally, that's my message, I think, is keep going. And if you do keep going, there's always, always a payoff to perseverance. There always is. So you just have to keep going and keep moving forward. And over time, you will make progress. You will.
I think this is very interesting what you just talk about. You will feel frustrated. You will feel like, oh, I don't know if I can keep going. But I think if we have a community, I think that's why you have the bilingual zoo there for all the parents, to talk about it. And then I also have a Facebook page. Parents would come and email me or send comments and say, what do I do? And then I think that's also one thing I always talk about. I say, be like water. Be like water. We need to be soft, but at the same time very strong. The water for years, they will go through the rocks in the ocean. So that's how strong water can be, but it's also very flexible. And I think that's what we're both agree on this, and we also think this is something very important. Be flexible and be like water and keep moving forward. So you won't see it the next day, but if you keep doing it every day, I think language learning is an everyday effort for our family, for our children. So if we can keep that moving forward, and we will see the difference. I think that's
Yes.
perseverance. Kind of make me feel like it's like a kung fu practice.
Well, I love that idea about water, and I will have that in mind the next time I'm flat on my back too. And it's about, over time, what I've also seen, and I know this is harder early on for parents, particularly when the child is small and they really can't see any progress yet because the child hasn't begun speaking, right? But we have to be patient. We have to be faithful. We have to believe that our efforts will matter over time. And they do. You have to believe that. And, if you don't see changes right away, it doesn't mean nothing is happening. There are things that are happening. If you put your honest effort, your best and honest effort into this day by day, you will experience progress over time. And the faith needs to be behind that. And I can tell you that's true, but you won't necessarily know that in your bones until you go through the experience yourself. But, Amanda is absolutely right to say that, a community of people is very important to be able to remind new parents in particular, or parents who are earlier on in this journey, about these important ideas and these important truths, I think. And I think, for both of us, I think that's at the heart of this work, is that because, the idea of supporting children to be able to learn, to acquire, and to use a second and third and beyond that language, I think is such an important thing, not just for the many kinds of advantages that people talk about, one day economically and all the rest. That's all important, I understand that, but there's something deeper about that, and it connects to the idea when we talk about, frustration and everything else, is that this is important to us on an emotional level, on a deep family, human level. And that's at the heart of it. That's why I'm online. And, I've done this for 20 years now, and I have a certain amount, I've been blessed to gain a certain amount of experience that I want to share. And again, I don't say, do it my way, but I say, here's a wide variety of ideas, look at all this stuff and find, what works for you, and you can do it too. And because if it's truly important to you, especially at the emotional family level, where, you want your child to be able to communicate in your language, which is, as deep as it gets, I think, particularly for me in terms of, my own native tongue. But beyond that, it's for the family itself and my extended family. If my parents in the United States, if they couldn't communicate with their own grandchildren in English, they just really couldn't develop the same kind of relationship, even from this distance, right? And then beyond that, for generations to come, at least theoretically, right, that my children could hand down English to their children and beyond. So, what we do today, we read one more book, we read aloud one more book, and we wonder, does it make a difference? Yes, it all makes a difference, because it all amasses, it all comes together over time in this, I think, this glorious gift of a second language that the children will then, beyond their own childhood, will take into their adulthood and benefit their life and benefit the people they come in contact with, including perhaps their own children and, the descendants that will follow well beyond our own time. So, what we do today matters. And I think it's important for us to, reflect on that. And it not only matters for, this bilingual journey, but, every day matters anyway in terms of living our life, right? And living a fulfilling life. So it matters in both respects. And I don't think we can get any, kind of deeper or more gratifying than that in terms of what the bilingual journey can do, because what it can do ultimately is kind of wake us up to the value and the worth of every day of our lives. And I certainly don't, I can't always remember that. And I struggle myself with a variety of issues, but I try to come back to that as my touchstone. And so I encourage parents to view it that way as well, to use every day well for your own particular bilingual journey and your own life. And at the same time, have a broader kind of vision for this, because it's something that grows over time. And we also need to be patient and faithful.
Yes, I think what is very important for the language, especially for us, me, a Chinese language, and you, English. I think also it's a part of the identity of our children. I think because, we're in a mixed race marriage, and I think for the kids, for me, they're American, but they are also Chinese, because I'm from Taiwan, so they do have a special connection with Taiwan. And then I think that's very important for them to go back to visit my parents, even though they're in the States, but they can talk to them. And then I think gradually, that will be a part of their identity, the language, the culture. So I think that's also a big part of it. That's why we want to keep it going. And then my son actually, I think a while back, I think he was tired about, doing homework, with me. And then he's like, oh, I'm so tired. And I say, okay, then what should we do? And then he started saying like, oh no, but if I don't do it, I won't be able to teach my own children Chinese. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting, his reaction. Fantastic. Seriously.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, that's the sort of thing that I think is part of the payoff over time. Our perseverance, particularly through those moments, and I've had my moments with my own kids, certainly, where, maintaining a daily homework routine is a very valuable practice, a very valuable habit, but it's not easy to sustain day by day over the years. It's not easy, but, it's something that really is important, I think, to their larger development in terms of not only their literacy, but their overall language proficiency. And so, at the same time, I try to be a kind and playful father. I'm also firm, with what I think is important, because I do think, even if they don't necessarily see the value of that as they grow up, I think as they get older, they do come to recognize that value more and more. And I do think, once they're adults, that they will look back and they will look at us, again, I'm hoping, but they will look at us and say, thank you for being as persistent as you were about that language and that culture, because it really matters to me in my life now. And so, I think that can help us to sustain our energy when times get tough, because in fact, we're not the only ones who want our kids to be bilingual. They actually, in their heart of hearts, even if they don't know it yet, they want to be bilingual too.
That is very true. Actually, I think recently my daughter actually came home and asked me why another friend of hers does not speak Chinese, even though the parents can speak Chinese. And then it was really hard for me to explain to her, because I think the girl doesn't feel, so good about it, because I always talk to my children in Chinese in front of other people as well. So I think sometimes, and then after a while, she told me, hey, their family, the brother and the sister, they're now both learning Chinese because they want to. So I think it's an influence as well, because even though we're in an English-speaking society, but I think sometimes, maybe because the parents are too busy, maybe for certain reasons, they didn't start us earlier. But I really think sometimes, friends can be a positive impact as well. So my daughter would help, this sister and brother to learn something simple that she can help her. So I think that is something the kids can do. And then like you said, over the time, and I think they learn whatever they're doing at home actually is very valuable.
Yes, I think the experiences that they have over time, and I think this is another thing, and I stress this point in the book as well, is that we need to instill that idea of value in the language and the culture, but yes, the language, so they feel that it does have value to them. And I know the challenges are different, particularly depending on the particular language and the particular environment, right? I know that, but I think the principle remains that we need to find ways over time to instill that sense of value. And I think the story that you tell about the other child and their interest in learning Chinese, I think it also, underscores the idea that it's never too late. It's never too late. And, the book may be geared in some ways for families earlier on in the journey, but it's never too late, as I said, for families to still take advantage of the same kinds of concepts and ideas. And so I always encourage parents when, they come to me with questions about, my son is already 5 or 7 or 10, is it too late? Well, no, because I've certainly seen over time, as a teacher and as a parent and as someone who has a presence online and interacts with a variety of people around the world, that it's never too late. And so you just need to start. You need to start today and establish certain effective habits and routines for your own particular environment and sustain those efforts over time. And over time, as I say, you will make progress. So it's absolutely never too late. And it's just a small example, but my children are now learning Spanish, and I'm trying to. But I could say, well, it might be too late for all of us, but they're still at a very basic level. But there's no reason why they can't make progress over time. And so I don't put the same emphasis on Spanish as I do on English, because I view them differently in terms of our aims, right? But that's just a simple or a small example that, we're taking on a third language, and I have realistic, at least for the moment, I have realistic expectations, right? But I do try to further that progress through small daily efforts, day after day after day. And I think that's the thing, progress is made in small steps over time. And so I would encourage every family, even thinking about it, to start today, start today and move forward from there.
Absolutely. Seize the day. Every day is important. Every day, every little step is important for the kids. So now let's talk about reading books. And I love books. I love reading. I like to tell stories. My kids love stories, crazy stories. I mean, I make up stories, and my students love it because they just thought it's hilarious. Why books? Why reading? Why storytelling? You actually extensively, talk about that in your book, and then also on your blog. And then I think we would like to touch on that for parents as well.
Well, I think, along with language use, what I mean by that is talking to the child, providing this kind of oral exposure in the target language. Another way to do that, and it's another bedrock, I think, along with this kind of spoken input, is through books and reading. And, early on, when I was a younger teacher, I came across this book. It's called The Power of Reading by Stephen Krashen. And I mention it in my book, and I talk about his work because it really opened my eyes and really persuaded me that the idea of flooding the environment with books and reading material and reading activities and reading aloud on a daily basis could be the bedrock for supporting strong progress in the target language. And I did that as a teacher from early on and have continued that way. And I've done that from day one with my own kids. And the results have been very rewarding. So I do emphasize these ideas in my book, and books and reading. There's so much to say, and I'm not sure we can talk about too many things right now. But the idea of captive reading, which I talk about extensively, which is, taking material. In our case, I put it on the wall of the bathroom, and I've done that for years. And it's the kind of reading material that from early on, starting with just the ABCs in our case, and moving to, short sentences and riddles and a variety of other approaches. Now, at this point, I'm copying, full books page by page and putting them on the bathroom door. And it's this kind of captive audience approach where there's the text and they have this a certain competence in reading now, and they read without even me being present. So it's all these different things we do from all these different angles, and there's so much we can do in terms of books and reading. And just one more point about reading and books is that I talk in the book about this study that was done. It's an international study, and it didn't focus specifically on bilingual families. It was just looking at families in general. But from a range of countries, they interviewed 70,000 people about reading. And the idea was, the question they asked essentially was, how many books did you have in the house when you were growing up? And what they found essentially is that, the more books that the families had, the more success, academic success, and that really translates to language success in a way, but the more academic success and even career success beyond that the children had. So, books and their use, of course, in the home, they can't just gather dust, but, when we emphasize resources in the target language, and we may need to even limit the resources in the majority language, but if we do that, then we can enrich our whole environment, and we have these resources, these books and music and apps and DVDs and everything else. And if we think broadly about resources and we maintain a steady stream of these resources into the house, because our kids are growing and we need to match their evolving maturity level, their language level, their interests, and we do that on a persistent basis, then we can create that engagement in the language. It's more easy to create that engagement because we have these suitable resources, and it makes the parents and the children more excited about it, right? So, this is all to say that I really encourage parents to make that a big part of their efforts is resources, particularly books, and really get these things flowing into the home. And, there's no getting around that it takes some investment, but, it's a small investment when compared to, sending a child to a private school or something like that. And I'm not, putting that down. That could be a real viable option for some families, right? But if that's not really an option, or you don't have access to a dual language school or something like that, then it's well worth the investment to bring in resources into the home on a continual basis.
I think the books will be the great way, and I think in the books you also talk about the CDs, the Skype, the family, games and outing, all kinds of ideas. That's why I think your book is a great resource, a guidebook for parents, no matter what target language they're working on. So I think that's the important thing. So I think the book is a big part of it, but also, extended to different resources. And I think you can all find it in Adam's book. So, and I think, we are going to touch on, if you're doing very well. And one thing you also talk about, like, we need to be evolving, go with the kids since they're growing. So how do we keep their enthusiasm? At the same time, how do parents keep their high spirit every day? To remind themselves, say, I'm going to do this every day, and I'm going to be positive and happy. The kids' enthusiasm and the parents, positive spirit. Let's touch on that.
Yeah, so, it's not easy, of course, but again, I think it comes back to being playful and having a playful nature, and, being enthusiastic about your day and your efforts. And so, I talk about enthusiasm in the book, and I even make the point that, we can kind of, we can make ourselves enthusiastic, right? We can actually do that, and we can choose enthusiasm. And so, it's very, very important, I think, throughout to make this a process that is enjoyable for not only the children, but for the parents as well. We really need to enjoy this. And, and that's what joy is about. It's about enjoyment, right? So I really, if it wasn't playful for me, if it wasn't fun for me, I really wouldn't consider, even if I was able to kind of force this progress along, I wouldn't consider that a success. I think success to me is, achieving the aims that you have in terms of language development, but it's also enjoying the journey. And for me, I mentioned before about hunting for Bigfoot in the forest yesterday, and that's just one example. But I think that's the sort of thing that we have to pursue. And that's the kind of thing that, when parents feel tired or they feel out of ideas, what I'm trying to do is offer my experience and my ideas to support that process, to move further for another day, right? And so, take advantage of the blog and the forum and the book, because again, it's a big buffet of food for thought. And, when you feel down or you feel, your gas tank has run dry, well, I hope that, what I'm offering can offer you some support for another day and offer some fresh ideas. And if it does, and if it can move you forward, then that's truly gratifying for me, and that makes all of this worthwhile.
Yeah, I think so. And also I think it's like a support group for the parents to kind of, be cheerleaders for each other, and get more ideas and to keep it going. So while we talk about being joyful, a lot of fun, you show the book, do you have anything you want to show us, or something you use with your own kids? And then, the parents can have an idea. What do you have used, in your family, when you're doing the language, lessons or playful time with your kids?
Well, okay, I'll introduce one thing. My kids are a bit older now, so it's not something I use as regularly, I suppose. And it may not, for parents with younger kids, this could be something that could be quite effective. But hello, hi, I'm Princess Pop. Time to get up. Hi, I'm Princess Pop. Hi, Miss Panda. Hi. Yes, this is Princess Pop. Yes, I'm Princess Pop, and I speak the target language. I only speak the target language. That's right, I'm an annoying puppet, but I only speak the target language, and that's the most important thing, right? So, you get the idea. In fact, I do annoy my kids with this puppet these days. And, it's just one way to have fun with them on one level. But, it is an annoying puppet that only speaks the target language. And when you have a puppet, or maybe even a whole army of puppets that speak your target language, they can actually support the situation when your children are young, let's say, because children kind of believe in puppets and they may want to interact with your puppet. It can even become kind of part of the family. So this is just one, quick idea, but, it's one way to have fun and be playful and yet be effective at the same time. So when we can marry those things, when we can be effective and yet we can be playful too. Hi, I'm Princess Pop. Time to get up. So anyway, yeah, he's very annoying about in the morning, right? Time to get up. So anyway, that's just a quick idea, but it's a way to have fun and be effective. So let's try to do both things at once whenever possible.
I have a whole box of puppets, so I totally understand. Definitely very effective. Yes. Oh my, this is so funny. Okay, back to your book. I want to talk about, actually, for busy parents, this is a book with over 300 pages. But you have quotes and quick takeaways. So why do you do that?
Well, it is a big book because, I really wanted to bring together a lot of ideas that, could benefit parents, because I know every family is different and they face different sorts of circumstances. And so there's a real wide range of ideas that parents can make use of. But at the same time, you know, it's composed again of 60 chapters basically with an appendix, and there's 30 perspectives, 30 principles. And I know parents are busy, you know, I'm a busy parent too. I completely empathize with that. So I really wanted to organize the book in a way that would be helpful for busy parents. And so, you know, each chapter is not very long usually, and parents can pick it up and put it down when they need to. If they have a, you know, a crying baby, they need to pick up and they put down the book. But at the same time, it offers quotes to start each chapter and a quick takeaway at the end, because I think these quotes and quick takeaways can crystallize the ideas and also serve as helpful reminders for parents when they want to pick up the book again, and they don't necessarily need to read the whole chapter again. You know, those quotes and quick takeaways can instantly remind the parent of that idea. So that was the thinking behind that. And at the same time, the appendix is quite full and includes, in fact, 45 questions which connect to the content of the book. And those questions actually are kind of a checklist for raising a bilingual child. And so even going to the back of the book and finding those questions which connect to the content, the chapters in the book, I think could really be useful. So I've tried to make the book as user-friendly and as helpful as possible. And it, like I say, it's the culmination of 20 years of experience. And the book itself took over 3 years to write and went through many, many revisions with a lot of feedback from other parents out there who I'm very grateful for. So it was read by about 30 people. So it really, really went through an extensive process, and I hope it can speak to as many parents out there as possible and be as helpful as possible to people as well. So, and beyond that, you know, again, the blog is there and the forum is there, and I can be contacted personally too. So, you know, I'm here to help parents as long as I can keep going. And then beyond that, I don't know. But, you know, at least the book is out there now, and I'm very happy about that. And I'm very happy at the very warm reception that it has gotten from parents and leaders in the field worldwide.
I think it's a wonderful book. I enjoyed tremendously. My son actually started reading it. So I really think it's a guidebook, and then I think it's a book you should have at your home. So it's a reminder of you can do this. And so last but not least, Adam, and share your words of encouragement with all the parents who are on this bilingual journey.
Well, I would just like to, you know, again, kind of underline the idea, you can do this and you need to keep going. And it doesn't mean you can't feel frustrated or tired or take a break when you feel low physically or mentally or emotionally. We all do. And I do as well. And I hope my work online and off comes across that way, that, you know, I'm human too, and we all are. And if you do keep going and, you know, you keep taking steps forward over time, what you'll achieve is very much the idea of, you know, the journey of 1,000 steps. You know, it begins with one and it continues from there, step by step by step. So it's not one thing we do. It's not one day of effort, or it's not one thing we do in that day, but, you know, it's the whole range of things we do day after day after day. And if we have patience and persistence and playfulness, then over time, I can guarantee you that you and your children will make rewarding progress. And I'd love to hear about it. So, you know, let me know what you think about my work, and let me know how your journey is going. And I love to hear good news, so please feel free to share that too. So, you know, I send you my very best bilingual wishes from Hiroshima, Japan. And I hope in some way that our lives can continue to intersect, you know, whether it's in this virtual way or whether somehow, somewhere we meet in person. And I would love that too. So I just want to thank Amanda for having the chance to talk about this. I could talk about it all day, and you probably don't want to hear that. And, you know, no, please don't talk about this all day. Please stop, stop. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. And Amanda, thank you so much. And, you know, best bilingual wishes to everyone out there.
Thank you, Adam, for joining me today. You are so fun. Just like I said, you're fun, you're entertaining, you're serious, but you're joyful. So thank you again for joining me today and sharing your book, Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability, and your resources with us. One last thing, how can the audience connect with you?
Well, again, you know, please stop by Bilingual Monkeys, bilingualmonkeys.com. And that's my blog. And my forum is the Bilingual Zoo, and that's bilingualzoo.com. And the book, Maximize Your Child's Bilingual Ability, it's available at Amazon and all the global Amazon sites and many other online retailers, or you could probably stop in your local bookstore and order it there as well. So, and also I should add really that, you know, the book is a way for me to sustain my work online too. So I really appreciate your support in that way, because, you know, the blog and the forum can be accessed freely, and I encourage you to do so. And at the same time, you know, I need to sustain them. And so, you know, your purchase of the book really helps me to sustain that work and help that to grow, I think, towards the future too. So anyway, thank you. And again, thank you to Amanda. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. And thank you for all our audience and readers who are watching the show today. And let's always keep learning fun. And thank you, and I'll see you next time. 谢谢，我们下次见。